entertain a motion to open.
Motion.
I will.
It's a meeting of a joint meeting of the Acushnet Finance Committee,
It's these three.
Acushnet Board of Selectmen, and Acushnet School Committee.
And could I get a motion to open the meeting of the Acushnet Board of Selectmen?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're in session.
I'll make a motion to open the meeting of the Acushnet School Committee.
Motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next item, we'll rise to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The only item we have on our agenda this evening is a review of the school department budget. So at this point, I'll turn over to Dr. Bailey.
Okay, thank you. What you have in front of you, I just want to review the sheets that you have in front of you before we begin our presentation. The yellow sheet is two-sided. One side is the operational budget summary. The other side is the salaries for the district. The white sheet with the blue is the budget increases. And then the last sheet is the capital articles that we're putting forth. So at this point, just to get things started, for the past 3.5 months, we've been meeting together with all of our stakeholders, department heads, principals, and having a lot of conversation about the needs of our school, what the principals and department heads need to make their schools and departments better. And none of this was done in isolation. Everything that they put forth is aligned to our strategic plan. And as far as the process goes, they put in what they felt they needed for their schools or departments. They presented it to Mrs. Flynn and myself, and then we met with the budget subcommittee to review all the requests. And we've pared it down quite a bit at this point. So we are preliminary looking at a $15,497,000 budget, which is a 5.694% increase over last year at this point. That's $834,809 over last year's budget. And what this budget speaks to, it maintains level services. We're talking about 3 new full-time positions and 1 new part-time position, which we will get into more. So this is just how the budget looks between the tuition and salaries. That really comprises most of our budget. That's 84% of our budget. And then you can see the rest of it is student services, instructional equipment, facilities, and administration. But the bulk of our budget is the tuitions, high school, special ed, and then all salaries, which are fixed costs according to contracts.
Okay, so how we're going to talk about our budget tonight is how we've done it in the past few years, for those of you who have been with us. So you can probably refer to the yellow two-sided sheet. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna break down the budget into these components. And we'll go from the biggest part to the smallest part, so.
Kristen, is it possible to move that TV set at all to, if that could move like 3 feet to the right, that'd be,
Yeah.
Well, then the public can't see.
I'm not gonna know until you sit down if that's a good spot. We don't wanna block out the people behind you either.
Right, right.
Yeah, better.
Is that better?
We can move.
She may not be happy, but, okay. Definitely better.
Good?
Yep, thank you, good,
Okay.
thank you.
So,
Thank you.
what you wanna do is take a look at this yellow sheet, and that's how we're going to follow along. One side is all the salaries, and the other side is all of the expenses. So we break it out into salaries and expenses. Now, for your purposes and our purposes, this is how we report it, actually for our purposes, to the Department of Ed. This is our line item budget. So this is organized by function code, and those are all the line items within the school budget. Now, obviously, to be more concise, some of them are lumped together. You see classroom supplies. It's all of the classroom supplies. It's not grade 2 broken out, grade 3 broken out, grade 1 broken out, it's all of the grades together. So it's similarly like that, but these are the line items that we report to the Department of Ed at the end of year report. So that's what those numbers along the left side mean, in case anybody's wondering. So, the first part of our budget, the largest part, is salaries, as you might imagine. We have a large staff, and our staff provides a service, so that's where most of our expenses are. So we have $8,839,891 in salaries. And what we'll do later on is we'll tell you what changed from last year to this year in salaries and all the other components, so you can see what makes up that increase. Tuition makes up $4,169,213, the next largest component. Student services is $1,304,695. And in student services, we have our costs for transportation, health services, costs like that are district-wide costs across the district that aren't necessarily tied to instruction or facilities. The next cost, these are instructional services expenses. Those would be your textbooks, supplies, things of that nature. Facilities expenditures, including utilities, and district administration. So it would be the school committee expenses, the superintendent's office, central office, business office, legal services. So that's just an overview of what makes up those components. So you can see on all of those, except for the salaries that I just went through, when you look at the operational budget side, you can see the detail in that. So you can see, for example, we'll take tuition, the largest one. Tuition to mass schools, that's high schools. Tuition to private, that's private residential special ed placements. Collaborative special ed placements. So you'll see utilities broken down for heating of buildings and then utilities. Heating is broken out by the Department of Ed, so that's why we break it out here. And then you'll see transportation services, student activities, athletics, and then you see your instruction, which is all of your supplies. So that's just, a quick way to look at what we're talking about. Try to make it as clear as possible. Okay, so salaries. That's the largest component of the budget, as we said. We have 142.25 FTE. FTE is full-time equivalency. So some of these people work full-time, some people work part-time. So that's where the .25 comes in. So how that's broken out is in the operating budget that we're talking about with you tonight, 127.05. So that's what's being paid for within this budget. We also have 15.2 FTE that we pay for through other grants and funds. We have a special education grant, a Title I grant, preschool revolving fund, and a school lunch revolving. So here's how our staff is broken up. District leadership and administration, you can see 4 FTE, and the cost allocated for FY21 to those folks. Instructional leadership, 14.75, and that includes the principals, the directors, their secretaries, any support staff that they have in their offices, and technology as well. Classroom teachers, obviously that's the biggest bulk of our staff, 74.5. 2.5 of those are paid by grants and funds. Therapists would be the speech therapists, the occupational therapists. Substitute teachers, we don't assign an FTE to that because they're just a daily sub, most of them. Paraprofessionals, we have 24 paraprofessionals, with 6 being paid for by our grants and funds. Guidance and adjustment counselors, we have 5. We have 1 school psychologist. The attendance and residency officer is a very part-time position for a person who does all of our residency checks. Medical and health services, that's our school nurses. We have 1 in each building. Food service, 6 FTE between the 2 buildings. And as you can see, the budget is 0 because the food service department is entirely supported by the school lunch revolving fund. So there's nothing in this budget other than a small amount that goes to food service. Student activity stipends. These are stipends for our teachers and staff who are coaches for athletics programs, who are advisors for extracurricular, such as yearbook, media club, all different clubs that we have here. We also have school security, which is our SRO, and also any amount that we might budget for any police detail for larger events such as 8th grade graduation. Custodial and maintenance, and we have seven FTE for that. All right, our next largest portion of the budget is tuitions to other schools. So now we're back to the operational budget side of this. And you can see on with the 9,000 account, the tuitions to mass schools. Here we have budgeted the students that we have going to our various high schools and school choice. As you know, we budget for Bristol County, Agricultural, New Bedford High School, Fairhaven High School, and school choice. Students who go to Old Colony are not in the school department's budget, so that's why they're not listed here tonight. So for FY '21, we're predicting a total of 313 students to be in these various placements. You know, most of you have been with us before, so you know what we do for the tuition is we take the current enrollment of our 9th through 11th graders, and we get rosters from the schools, I would say, at least 3 to 4 times a year, so we know our students that are over in these high schools. We take those students and then we add to them any 8th grade students that we know of. We take our whole 8th grade class and we find out where they're going. Now, this is not where a lot of them end up. Kids do change their minds, but we do the best we can at the beginning of January to predict where everybody's going to be next year. So you can see that's what we have broken out for next year. Bristol Aggie, 10 students, New Bedford High, 25, Fairhaven High, 260, and school choice, 18. Our students from Acushnet that are in school choice placements, they do go to Freetown, Lakeville, Berkeley, Westport, Dartmouth, and Old Rochester, and some virtual schools as well. Out-of-district tuition, these are our special education placements. Collaborative, so we have a number of students who go to programs that exist in public schools that are run by local collaboratives. We have the Southeastern Mass Collaborative, we have Reed's Collaborative, and South Coast Ed Collaborative. So these programs, as I say, exist in our public schools, however, they're run by a collaborative school, and we pay a tuition for our students to go there. So you can see where it's broken out for collaborative tuition and private tuition. There's also an offset for the revenue that we expect to receive from the state for circuit breaker. You know, a lot of you who've been here know what that is, but for anyone new, what that is reimbursement from the state for costly special ed expenses. So it's over a threshold of approximately $40,000 to $45,000. The state reimburses you for any costs over that in the following year. So that's how we're able to know exactly how much we're getting, and we can take it off the budget this year. So this graph is just another way to show how our special ed tuitions have been budgeted over the years. You can see the highest was in 2012, went down, went back up, down again, back up, and we're back going down. So you can see that it can vary from year to year, from student to student.
Our third largest component is student services at just over 1.3 million. We have a small amount for attendance and residency, which includes the travel reimbursement for our residency officer. Our medical health services, that amount is supplies for our nursing offices. Athletics, student activities, and food services, that's a budgeted amount for those contract services and supplies for athletics. Could be for referees, busing, any supplies that are needed, and then there's a small amount for food service. Student transportation, almost 1.3 million, and actually we're going to break that down a little further at this point. So $1,293,695, and the way that's broken down is the regular day. Those are our big yellow school buses, and that, as you can see, is the largest amount. Our special education amount is all of our out-of-district transportation. And we always try to cost share with the districts around us. So if we have children in other districts and in Acushnet, like for example, we're sharing rides to out-of-district placements with Fairhaven, because these costs can run anywhere from $225 to $250 per day. So those costs add up very quickly. So whenever we can, we try to do a cost share. McKinney-Vento, that is our homeless, that's for homeless students, and that varies year to year. We've been tracking that for the past 3 years. So in FY '17, we spent $44,000, '18, we spent $12,000, and in '19, $35,700. This year, so far, we don't have anyone, but that could change at any moment's notice when we're notified of students who are homeless. Foster students, very similar. We had one foster student transportation, but in the past, we did not track it, so we are now starting to track it. And then the late bus, we have 2 buses that run 2 days a week at the Ford Middle School, and those buses are for the majority of the year as needed.
And regarding the McKinney-Vento and foster student transportation, the reason why we start to track it and break it out of our transportation now is that in the past several years, the Department of Education has reimbursed cities and towns for McKinney-Vento transportation. So we need to report to them not only how much we spent, but how many students, so that they can come up with the reimbursement. And that reimbursement is a general fund reimbursement. And I believe they're going to start reimbursing for foster students, so they had given us a heads up to start to, separate those students out. So where they once were, their costs were just associated with other costs, they are now broken out so that we're ready to report it out to the Department of Ed when they're ready for us.
Our 4th largest component is nearly $600,000, and that consists of school leadership. That is all the expenses in the principal's offices, any office supplies, that's at all the departments, the elementary school, the Ford Middle School, the special education department. It also covers dues and subscriptions. The next line is therapeutic services, and that's for special education contracted services, including PT, OT, speech and language, ABA services. Professional development, that includes everything, Acushnet Elementary, Ford Middle School, special education, any tuition reimbursements for staff, PD consultants, conferences, travel reimbursements, textbooks, that's an obvious one, instructional equipment, library supplies. Typically, it's a small amount because it's just book replacements at this point. And we're going to talk more about the library as we move through this presentation. General classroom supplies, again, that's for everyone. Instructional technology, that is computer replacements, supplies, could be batteries, cords. Our internet access, that's $25,000 in itself. But we do get reimbursed from E-rate, but we must budget the full amount. Purchase and contract services, software programs, all the licenses we have, the phone system repairs. Then we have guidance supplies. And again, those are just for the offices in both buildings. And psychological services, we are moving towards an online testing with the Wyatt this coming school year. And for startup costs, that's what's reflected in this year's budget. But as we go through the presentation, you will actually see that this is going to be a cost savings for the district.
Okay, so our next largest, again, looking at the yellow piece of paper, you see where it says total maintenance expenses, the 4,000 accounts. So that's what we're looking at right now. So the total facilities and maintenance budget is $455,187. Now, again, this is expenses, not salaries, so no salaries are associated with what Dr. Bailey and I are talking about right now. It's the expenses. Custodial services, so that's custodial supplies for both buildings, the paper goods, any of the cleaning supplies, any of the custodial equipment that they need, any expenses related to the cleaning of the building. Heating of the building, that's the oil for both buildings. Utilities would be electric, propane gas, water, and telephone. And then maintenance would be our maintenance expenses, which could be anything, any parts, any paint, any, nuts, bolts, anything, tools, anything needed to support the maintenance of these two buildings. and any of the contract services that we contract out for maintenance, such as over February vacation, we had work on our generator, preventive maintenance on our generator, some work on our heating and air conditioning systems. We have fire alarm, fire sprinkler systems, so any of those either once a year or twice a year or even more a year services that we have done, that is in that component of the budget.
Next is the smallest component, our district administration, and that's just over 128,000. What that consists of, the first line you see there is school committee. That is for MASC policies. We've signed on for 3 years to update all of our policies, get them all online. We have a lot of policies in the state that are constantly being updated. Our MASC dues for the school committee, any conferences that the school committee members attend. Superintendent's office, this includes office supplies, conferences, travel, MASS dues, which is the Massachusetts Association for School Superintendents, NSIP program, the new superintendent's induction program. That is a 3-year program, and I will be in year 3 next year, and that cost is spread out for 3 years. Curriculum and instruction consulting, so any consultants that we have hired to work with our principals and schools and teachers. The business office, this is the same idea. Office supplies, travel, conferences, registrations, dues such as MASBO, advertising. We have to advertise on School Spring, and some things we are legally required to do some print ads for throughout the year. Audit, we have an end-of-the-year required audit report that we have to do. And legal fees, we basically kept that at level funded.
So at this point, what we're going to do is after we gave an overview of the entire budget, I think it's helpful to know, okay, so what changed from last year to this year to make up that $834,000, almost $35,000 increase? So that's a lot of money, so we need to give some context to it. So I think it's helpful to follow along on the sheet that has the blue. It's gonna follow the presentation, and it's gonna break down where those increases come from, okay? So just a quick overview of our $834,809 increase. It comes from salaries, tuition, transportation, facilities, professional development, supplies, and utilities, and there's a decrease for contract services. So we're gonna take each of those components and give some explanation to it.
Okay, some of those costs are fixed, like the stepping contractual increases. Those are according to contracts, and those are fixed costs. But here, we'd like to talk about the new positions that were put forth by the principals and department heads. If you remember, last year, we actually eliminated a library para, but always with the hope that we would add a certified library media specialist. We have the space in both schools, at both the elementary and Ford Middle School. And this would really help our students with 21st century skills, research, anything that's aligned to the Common Core curriculum. We really want to do this with the goal of upgrading both of our libraries eventually, but we really need an expert in there, a certified person to run both schools at this point. I did check with many area towns and cities about, do you have a librarian in your elementary schools, in your middle schools and high schools? And the ones who responded, the majority of them did have certified librarians. The ones who did not said it was due to budget cuts. So everybody seemed to be on board that this was an important position, and I know that it's an important position for our faculty as well. So the next one is a reading specialist at Ford Middle School. This was actually put forth last year by the middle school. At the elementary school, we have structures in place to help children who are struggling with reading. We don't have, there's interventionists at the elementary school, and they have a whole process. At the middle school, there is nothing in place to help our students. And we have many students who are reading below grade level at the middle school level. So just to give you some data around that, in 5th grade, 37% of our 5th graders are reading below grade level. 6th grade, 55% are reading below grade level. Seventh grade, 72% are reading below grade level. Eighth grade, 62% are reading below grade level. That's alarming to us. When you get to middle school, we should be at the point where kids are reading to learn and not learning to read, but we're not giving up on them. We need the support because our staff needs the support from an expert to help our students with their reading skills. So that's a high priority. The next one is also a high priority, a special education teacher. That would be a shared position at both the elementary school and the Ford Middle School. That is always based on the number of students and caseload that the teachers have. Last year, we actually cut a position based on the numbers, but our projections are showing that the Director of Student Services is letting us know that we really need another person to be shared at both buildings. We have on there part-time maintenance craftsman, and that is partially going to be offset by some building rental fees. But we're in discussions now with the town and school committee members to really talk about the maintenance of the fields. Just the landscaping alone takes hours upon hours, and we only have one full-time facilities director. So we're considering that to see if that part-time can be offset by some of our rental fees. School instructional leadership stipends, that is at the Ford Middle School. The teachers are going to be receiving stipends for leading. This is sort of in conjunction with the work they're doing on RTI, which is response to intervention. So when children have challenges, there's a process. So because the elementary school has such a strong process in place, we're really looking to replicate that at the middle school. It's going to look a little different because the middle school is structured very differently. But this will be, teachers will have a big part in this, and the teachers will be working monthly with the principals as well as the Teachers 21 consultant on this initiative. So those are for the stipends for the teachers. We have a director of cable and school department media. And that's really shared between the school department and the town cable fund. This position will focus on educational programming, training our teaching staff, working with the teachers and the students to produce some projects that align with the curriculum. It could be a video, but we have the TV studio now. We want to be able to utilize the equipment. This person would also serve as an operational director for the TV studio as well as the town cable operations.
And of those positions, I want to add too that the first three are full-time positions. So those are full-time teaching positions. The other three are either, as Dr. Bailey said, stipends or part-time. So the bottom three, all three of them, they have a total cost associated of $33,000. So even though we're asking for these positions, they're a relatively low cost. So the next largest increase is from tuition. So the tuition increased by almost $180,000. You can see the high school tuition increased by about $250,000. And this is a result of more students attending high school placements than last year. We have, I think, approximately 8 more students attending high school placements. And the rate per student went up. So for example, at Fairhaven, the rate went up $288 per student over last year. We have 260 students budgeted at Fairhaven, so that makes up $75,000 of that increase. We also have 8 more students than last year, so that makes up another $85,000 of the increase. So the rest of the increase is made up by students who perhaps have higher cost special education component associated with their placement at New Bedford High and Fairhaven High. And again, we're talking mostly New Bedford and Fairhaven High here because that's where the bulk of our students are. And Bristol Aggie is just a very small tuition because the rest of the cost for Bristol Aggie is an assessment on the town side. So that's where the bulk of that comes from, a rate increase and also more students. Now, the rates are set by a formula that we have negotiated with both schools, with New Bedford and Fairhaven Public Schools, and it's based on an indicator that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has come up with. It's a school choice school choice increment. And so we take that as the base, and we take our formula that is spelled out in our negotiated agreements and apply that and come up with the annual tuition. So it's not just something that, you know, Fairhaven or New Bedford says, okay, this is your rate this year, Acushnet. It's definitely set to a baseline that we have established through our tuition agreements. The next component is we have a school choice decrease. Again, school choice is for students who attend schools in other cities and towns that accept students from other cities and towns. Acushnet does not, so we do not accept students that do not live in Acushnet, but you can choose to accept students from other towns through the Department of Ed, and then we are assessed a $5,000 fee per student for what we consider a regular education student. A student who has increased services associated with their education plan will have a higher than 5,000, but it's really, usually I haven't seen anything more than, say, 10,000 per student. So we do have some students who attend, as I said, Old Rochester Regional, Freetown Lakeville, Berkeley, Westport, Dartmouth. There are some students who attend New Bedford Public Schools on school choice, and there are some students who attend virtual schools on school choice. So from the cost that we have last year to what we're predicting for next year, it's a decrease of 13,000. And you might say, well, how do you even know that? Because we often don't know where these students are coming and going from because they haven't been with us and we don't track them as much. But we just take a look at the roster that the state provides, and we had a couple of grade 12 students, so I figured they were graduating and they came off. You know, it fluctuates from year to year. It's been down lately, but it had peaked a few years ago. The other component of that tuition adjustment is our out-of-district special education, and we had a decrease in our out-of-district special education tuition. The first, we'll take this collaborative tuition decrease. So it looks like what we had is kind of a flip-flop from collaborative to private. We had some changes in placements. We've had kids move in and move out. So for next year, we're predicting a $271,000 decrease in collaborative tuition, but it's actually $227,000 and a $214,000 increase in private school. We're also getting more circuit breaker revenue because our costs that we had filed for the year before were higher, so we're getting more revenue. So the good news is we get more revenue. The bad news is it was associated with a higher cost, okay? So that comes in from the state, and we just apply it, and we just take it off the top of the tuitions. We also have in there a placeholder for the special ed revolving fund. Last year, if you recall, to balance our budget at the very end, we put in to use $50,000 from the special ed revolving fund. We don't need to use that for next year's budget, so that's going back in. So the difference between using it and not using it is $50,000. And we don't anticipate prepaying tuition at this time, but as it gets closer to the end of the year, of the fiscal year, we may. But right now, it's not put into the budget. Other budget adjustments. So now we can take a look. The next one is student transportation. Thanks. So student transportation changed by $101,000. That's comprised of our regular day, the big yellow bus. So the contract every year, there's an increase in the contract. This is going to be year 3, so we'll be going out to bid for the following year. But about half of that cost is bringing the late bus back. If you remember, we did have to cut the late bus last year. We were able to bring it back at some point earlier this year with some funds that we knew that we didn't need based on some salary changes. So we were able to bring the late bus back, and we're hopeful to keep it in the budget for next year. So that's about $17,000 for the late bus, and our big bus contract went up by about $17,000. The other component is special education. We're looking at an increase of approximately $66,000 in special education transportation. That one's very difficult to budget for because sometimes the children, sometimes their placements change. The rides are expensive, as Dr. Bailey said. We're facing $250 per trip per day for the whole school year for maybe one student. Sometimes 2 students will go on the bus if they can. And then sometimes we can cost share with other districts. Right now, as Dr. Bailey said, we're cost sharing with Fairhaven. We've cost shared with Marion. Somerset, Fall River, I believe Dartmouth, as many other districts as we can in the past, so to try to get the rates down. And finally, other budget adjustments. So facilities, we are predicting to go up by 44,000. And this here, some of these are an effort to match the budgeted amounts with what we've expended over the years. So we know that over the years, we expend in facilities, custodial supplies, maintenance supplies, utilities, more than we budget. And when we start to make cuts at the end of the budget cycle, we usually cut from there first. So in this first preliminary budget, some of these increases are an effort to get to what the actual expenditures are. And we recognize that we may not be able to keep it at that level, but this is the first blush with it. Professional development increased by 33,000, supplies by 23,000, and again, supplies is anything from classroom supplies, papers, pencils, erasers, glue sticks, construction paper, anything used in the classrooms, to textbooks, to nurses' office supplies. So that's, that's comprised of that. Utilities, a small increase, and as Dr. Bailey mentioned earlier, a decrease of just under 32,000 in contract services. And what that is coming from is we anticipate that we will be doing more in-house psychological services with the people that we have, and so we'll be doing less outsourcing.
So this is our budget by cost center. It's just another way to look at it. AES and and this kind of looks the same as it did last year. The elementary school and Ford Middle School are roughly the same, but everything that is in their budget, it's 23% and 20%. Central administration consists of the superintendent's office, the business office, school committee. The district is things like tuition, transportation, technology, health services, our school resource officer, our residency officer, the director of curriculum instruction and assessment, technology salaries, PD tuition reimbursement, guidance counselor position shared at Fairhaven High School. And our special education component is anything in special education, the high school tuitions that are special education, the private and collaborative tuitions, contractual services, special ed transportation, our paraprofessionals, any conferences for special education, class
Teachers.
supplies, teachers, psychologists, test supplies that we're using with the psychologists. But that's just another way to look at it. It doesn't matter. This is just another way to look at the budget summary. Central office is just under 500,000. The elementary school, 3.5 million. The middle school, 3.1 million. Special education, just over 4 million. And the district, 4.3 million, just over 4.3 million, for a total of $15,497,080. And you can see that this is just a track of the percentage that we've seen over the years. We've seen anything from 0 to maybe 3.62. We know that this is a preliminary budget that we've presented tonight at 5.694% increase. But that's where we're at this moment in time.
So for FY '21, we're scheduled to receive at this time $6,400,252 in Chapter 70 state aid to the schools. And for Acushnet, this is the minimum $30 increase. So our increase of $38,000 from the state, $760, is just $30 per student that we have enrolled in our schools. So that's unfortunate, but that's what the formula dictates that Acushnet receives. And it's not unlike other schools around us.
And something that's new this year with that is we have what's called the Student Opportunity Act, and that is a mandate from the Department of Education. With that $30 that we get per student, that really amounts to probably $38,000, a little more than $38,000 that we received last year from Chapter 70 aid. But we have to come up with a 3-year plan with research-based strategies, we're looking at a continuation of our math curriculum, the interventions, and really tracking the subgroups at the middle school in math. That's something we've been working on, but the money will be used for the software, some Chromebooks that are needed, as well as professional development. But that is a mandate, and we have to put together a plan. It was just submitted today, actually. So.
So in summary, our total $15,497,080 budget, it's a percent increase of 5.694 and a total dollar increase of 830, just under 835,000. 41% of that $15 million budget is going to be funded as of right now from the state aid, Chapter 70, and 58.7% is the town contribution. So that completes our discussion, and we'll certainly take questions at the end of the local operating budget. What we want to discuss now is the capital requests that we have developed, and that'll be the second part of what our request is.
So if you look at this paper, it's got the red highlights on it. That's what you can refer to at this point. But we roughly are asking for $484,900, which is around the same amount that we requested last year. We've had meetings with our stakeholders, our staff, our administrators, to talk about what are the priorities in the district, things that we really need. The things that you see in red are our absolute top priorities. You know, one of the things is upgrading Wi-Fi district-wide. We've had a lot of concerns with our Wi-Fi. It's old. We've had students who have had to leave their classroom and sit out in a hallway to try to get signals. We definitely need, with all the technology that we're using for all of the software and things that are involved with the curriculum, we definitely need an upgrade with our Wi-Fi. The curriculum, this is a continuation of an article that we put in for last year. Because we cannot put it into our budget, we don't have the room. But as we adopt new curriculum programs, it will eat up the budget. We didn't use all of it last year, but we think that once we have a person on board, and we've been piloting and looking at different curriculum programs, as we purchase these programs, that money will go quickly.
Is
But
this is materials?
Yep,
Materials,
textbooks, it could be software, licenses, things like that that go along with the curriculum. But all of our curriculum is very outdated, so we can't do it all at once, and we know that, but we've really began to prioritize based on the need. So we're really looking at math first. Kristen, do you want to talk about the gym wall?
So last year, one of our items that unfortunately didn't make the cut was to replace the gymnasium cafeteria wall. That's the big wall that divides the gym from the caf. During the school day, we have it closed, obviously, but for large events, probably most recently for those of you who are at the PJ Keating hearings, it was open. The wall is old. It's probably about 20 years old. It's not in good shape. It's ripped, it's torn, it's dingy. It's not indicative of how we want people to see our schools. And it also is very difficult, has become difficult to open and close for our staff. So we had looked to replace it last year. Unfortunately, this is very costly. It's a large wall. It has a lot of mechanics to it. So the cost that we got last year was $80,000. We added a little bit more to it this year for any increases, but that's something we really feel that we need to address. We needed to address it last year. But unfortunately, as I said, I mean, there's just so many priorities, and there's only so much money for the entire town. So we're back with it this year, and we hope that that one can be supported. And the other priority we have is just to continue with funding for preventative maintenance for our roofs for both buildings. Throughout the year, we have some leaks in both buildings' roofs, so we need some funds to be able to address that. And that's for just any time we need to call the roofers to come and patch some holes and do some repairs in either roof.
There were things that we took off the list, like last year, we said we were going to, every year, do a $25,000 article to upgrade our technology. We actually took that one off because one of the things we added was the Chromebook carts, K-3. That is really needed because they don't have any access to Chromebooks right now. So if we can't get all grade levels, we can't get all grade levels, but we would start with more of the upper grades if we could.
Some of the other things that we have, you can see the driveway repair, that's to continue on to do some repaving throughout the school campus. We hope to do some this spring with the funds that we were allotted last year. And there's much more to do, including the new parking lot that was installed in between the two buildings, and also going around behind the elementary school. We have some potholes that come up that need to be fixed, and some cracks in our sidewalks and walkways that we need to address as well. We also put in some funds to replace the roof condensers at Ford Middle School. If you recall, last year we received funding to do the elementary school. And this is going to help us with our refrigeration and freezer equipment in the two cafeterias. Right now, where we replace them at the elementary school, and we're in the same situation in the middle school, is we're fixing things and we really need to transition into replacing. So we're looking for some funds to do that at the Ford Middle School.
We have on there carpet and tile replacement. Last year, we started to replace tiles at the elementary school. We have tiles that have actually been lifting up, so we were able to replace 3 classrooms worth of tiles. So we'd like to continue that work, as well as some old carpet in some of the offices, and it's probably original to the buildings.
And finally, we also have some funds in there for a dark fiber installation down Middle Road from our schools to the library to the police department. And I believe this would be an article that would be a multi-department article that would help several departments in town here and the town as a whole. Finally, before we get down to the special education stabilization, what I did was I took funds that I know in articles that are still open that we would like to reappropriate and use toward these expenses. We have an open article from FY19 to do some repairs in the elementary school bathroom. It was some repairs to some of the piping underground. It turned out we did not need to use that, but it is very specific to that project, so we would just like to reappropriate it. And there's also some funds left over from the elementary school condenser article that we would like to reappropriate as well, because we don't need to do any more work at the elementary school with the condensers. So that's a total of $31,100 that is sitting out there in open articles that we know we're not going to be accessing. So other than that, our final article is just to continue to fund the special education stabilization account. We put in $50,000 this year. So that is, as you all know, we have not had to access it, which is good. But it's a savings account for us in the event we have an unexpected large special education expense. So that can and does happen. And this will allow us to pay for these expenses if it is just something that we cannot deal with inside of the operating budget mid-year. So that's what our capital requests are. So that actually concludes our part of the presentation, and we can certainly take questions or from the boards.
Anyone have any questions, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Gaspar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kristen, last year, we had a huge increase in tuition as well for New Bedford and for Haven. And now we're looking at that similar increases, a little bit less, but similar increases. It's cumulative to the degree of, I think I calculated $606,000 increase just tuition for Haven and New Bedford over a 2-year period of time.
So as you said, most
Can you
of that.
explain, I know you said there's a formula, but it seemed like a dramatic increase last year, and I know you say we have 8 more kids. The last time I knew about Fairhaven, New Bedford's tuition, we were running somewhere around $13,000 to $15,000 per student. Is that still around that realm?
It's actually less than that. So the first part of the question is what makes up that increase? So, at last year, I don't recall, I don't know if you were at this presentation or not, Kevin, but one of the challenges, the biggest challenge we faced last fiscal year was the moving in of approximately 11 students over the summer before the start of the school year, after the budget season, over the summer that were now attending predominantly Fairhaven High at the time. So now we have 11 students that are coming in additional that we hadn't budgeted for. So those students, some of them may have been 12th graders, but most of them weren't. So now they're part of our base. So we have to include them in the base, not just for the FY20 budget, but now they're here for FY21. So that's that. We have more students again in our high schools from last year to this year. And that really is just a factor of the difference, very simply between the number of 12th graders graduating and the number of 8th graders coming into 9th grade. So the difference is between those two classes, and then any unexpected move-ins. We also faced over the course of last year, which was something that we hadn't in the past. It's leveled off this year, but we saw a greater number of students who were attending Old Colony move to Fairhaven High. We saw students, we've never seen before, leave their schooling at Bishop Stang and come to Fairhaven High. So that really impacted us a great deal last year. And now those students are still at our high school. So that's what's making that big swing. So the tuitions, as you said, right now, I can tell you what they are for Fairhaven and New Bedford. At roughly 10,000 a student. So when you have large numbers of changes like that we just cannot predict, it makes a big difference to the budget. So if you've got 10 kids at $10,000, that's $100,000 that we need to come up with. So for this year, the Fairhaven High School tuition is $10,657 per student for the regular education student. Any students who receive special education services, they have the base of that $10,657, and then they have an increment associated to it, an additional charge. Some of them range from as low as $1,000 to as high in Fairhaven as probably about $9,500. So we have some students attending Fairhaven High School at a cost of almost $20,000 per student. However, that's still less costly than going out to a collaborative, which is roughly $45,000. It can go anywhere from $45,000 upwards of $50,000 to $70,000. So, that is that's our unfortunate reality. New Bedford High School tuition this year, I believe it went down from last year to this year. It did. So in FY21, our New Bedford High per student tuition is $9,774. Last year it was $10,176.
Can you
We
say the
don't have-
9,000 number again?
$9,774 per student at New Bedford High. We have a lot fewer students at New Bedford High. However, it is increasing this year. We have more students going to New Bedford High this year. Like Fairhaven, there's a special education component associated with it. And some of our students who have higher needs, we will recommend that they go to New Bedford High because they have more services available for these student needs there. So you're going to see at New Bedford High, most of the increment tuitions for New Bedford High are right around $8,500. There's one that's $10,653 and one that's very low at $4,100. So those New Bedford High tuitions can run up to upwards of $20,000 like Fairhaven. Okay? So I think did that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Yes, it
great.
does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I had a question. On 9,300, that's the tuition. Under private, is it $214,342? Can you explain that? Where in previous years we had,
Sure.
very.
So it really depends on the needs of the student or the needs of the students. Some students attend what is identified as a collaborative placement. It's a public school special education placement. Some are private school placements, and those are more costly. So in the past, we may not have had any students in private placements, or where you see one year there was $6,000, they probably were in the private placement for a very short amount of time that year. But that is a tuition to a private residential or sometimes not residential placement that we have, and that does include other services as well.
Why the big But why the big increase in 1 year?
It's a new placement. So last year, the
I
child,
mean, a new placement, good.
he qualified for residential. The special education team put him through to a residential placement.
Okay, so it's up to the team that makes that decision. And so
Based on the
in 1
needs.
year, they've gone from from 55,000, whatever, like, that was the last one, up to over 200,000 in 1 year?
It was
Have we
probably
had
a-
an
yeah, it was
increase in
probably a
special
different student, Mr.
needs,
Househoff.
or is it basically the determination of this team committee?
So it's determined based on the needs of the student, based on the team. We do have Mrs. Betancourt, who's our Student Services Director here. I don't know if you can add anything, Kim. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I know you know the answer.
Yeah.
So it's always best to hear it from who knows.
If you notice. Good evening. If you notice, the collaborative amount was reduced substantially. It was about 220,000 reduction in the collaborative. So we just flipped placements. So you'll see that increase in the
Okay.
private, but a significant reduction in the
Okay, so you-
collaborative.
It's actually less.
It is less.
It's an overall decrease.
All right, thank you.
So it really, and it actually highlights one of our biggest challenges is that we have a large swing of costs for tuitions from high school to 10,000 to one placement upwards of 200,000. Now, some school districts have more than one or two students in these costly placements. We have that one student or two students in a residential placement, a private placement. So that's the reason, another reason why we do need to have that special education stabilization fund to try to help us if we do have an unexpected swing in costs. So that's just one of our challenges that we talk about every year.
Somebody could move in who was already at a residential placement, move to Acushnet, and now we have that bill. So that's why that stabilization fund is key, because that can go quickly.
Could I ask a question, Mr. St. Jean, on the stabilization? Is there $50,000 in there now and we're adding 50? Is
There's
that what this
actually,
does?
I believe, more than that, Mr. Cabral, if you just give me a second.
I think
I
it's
do have that.
150.
Say it again?
Because
think
I
it's
think we
If I'm
start,
not
right.
mistaken, yeah, we did 100,000 the first year,
Yeah.
and then last year we put in 50,000, and like Kristen
And we
said, they
haven't
didn't have
used
to
any.
spend it.
Add 50, so if we add another 50, there's gonna be 200,000 in that account?
It's a separate fund.
And again, last year we used it to try to balance the budget, but we don't anticipate, right now, we're not using any to balance the budget, but, that remains to be seen as we go through the
And these are
process.
reserved funds, the town's got them set aside for?
Yep, so
okay.
that special ed, it's like a reserve fund. If it were to be used, it would have to be a vote from the school board and the Board of Selectmen to use the funds. So you won't see it on the operational budget. It's a separate fund, but we usually fund it in a separate article every year.
Is there a targeted number you'd like to see?
We started this about 2 years ago, and I remember the former town administrator, I believe he may have had a target. We haven't really discussed a target. I think we would like to get it a little bit higher, but certainly, and I don't know, Julie, you might know if there's a limit placed on how high it can go.
There is a
Not to say
limit.
that we want to keep, we want to keep stockpiling. We certainly don't.
There is a limit, but it, I don't know it offhand, but it's a huge number that we aren't even close to.
I mean,
Right.
one
Because it's like a
placement can
percentage of your
be,
whole budget.
Right.
yeah,
So,
100 to
One
2,000.
placement could wipe it out.
Oh, wipe the whole thing
Right,
out, yeah.
right. So I think we still have a little bit to go, but certainly that's something that we would be cognizant of what the town can bear and versus, what we want to try to have as a buffer, because that could really be very detrimental to the operations of the school department if we didn't have that, because these are costs we have to pay. So if we have this unexpected cost come in, we have to pay that. So if it's October and we're just starting the year, now what do? How do we recoup those costs? Those have to be paid. Do we have to think about, we have very little in supplies, very little discretionary funds, as you saw. Most of our funds are in salaries, tuitions, and transportation. So then what happens? So that's where that is really helpful to have that savings account, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gaspar? Oop, okay, still
You can go
Gaspar.
first.
What do we have in that balance for the special ed fund? I know we usually do it by article. Do you know what that balance is?
That was
Do you-
150,
150,
correct?
150.
Yeah, that was
Julie? Yeah,
150.
150.
So is currently 150 in it?
We
and
have
we're-
not accessed it at all, so we,
And we're looking for 50
50.
to
correct,
go to
to bring it up
200.
to 2.
But as you've explained before in the past, how exorbitant those special ed numbers can fluctuate, and it could be one student that could wipe that right out, depending on the need. So that's,
It's a
200,000
fairly-
sounds like a lot of money, but when we're talking about special education, it's
Be
not.
transportation, which is, just local transportation is $250 a day. And if we have one student on one van or bus, that goes very quickly.
Delgado?
You can go first, Mike. I've got a list.
You got a list,
I got a list.
Maybe I'll knock out some of this. I was at the meeting last year, and one of the things that we talked about that was a priority for the school was the curriculum director. I don't see that on the ads, so can I assume that that role was filled?
Oh, yeah, we're in the process of hiring someone.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We actually have final interviews on Friday.
And if you don't mind, you quoted some stats
Mhm.
that, quite frankly, were kind of appalling to me regarding the reading levels.
Mhm.
Could you give those to me again?
Also, connected with that is the trend. They're alarming enough, but is there a trend upward or downward as far as, the scorings?
Better
So-
or worse,
So we can get a pattern where we're headed?
Right, so we talked last year that generally speaking, we have 50% of our students who are not meeting grade level standards. And that's still the same.
50?
I mean, it fluctuates slightly by grade level, but generally speaking, across the board, we're looking at 50%. We're above the state, so our data is above the state, but what do we say to parents whose child might be that other 50%? They're not making, that's why that curriculum position was so needed, to have somebody really driving the boat on that. So let's see. Okay. So fifth grade, 37% below, reading below grade level. Sixth grade, 55%. Seventh grade, 72%. Eighth grade, 62%.
And that's better than the state?
No, not the reading levels. I don't know where that falls with the state.
So I think Mr. Howcroft was asking how we compare with the state, or you answered based on our standardized
MCAS.
testing.
Yeah, based
right,
on
so
standardized testing, we are above the state. We're below the state in some areas like exceeding expectations. We're actually below the state. But overall, we're above the state, slightly above the state, generally speaking. This reading level concerns me because at the elementary level, they're taught reading. When they get to the middle school, they're expected to read to learn, and we still have children who are struggling with their reading skills. We want to be able to help them so they don't fall further behind. And if you look at those percentages, they're increasing. As the kids are here, they're actually increasing. And, the rigor of the literature gets more difficult as the years go on. So they really need those strategies, and hiring a certified reading specialist was definitely a priority for the middle school folks.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. We're on this issue. How do we compare with the suburban communities, like Fairhaven, Rochester, some of our
terms of
border
reading?
communities? Are we
Reading or MCAS?
on MCAS primarily?
I don't have that information with me right now, but I could certainly get that to you. I will tell you that across the state, middle schools do struggle. This is not an uncommon issue for Acushnet. Across the state, middle schools, you see a drop in middle schools. We have fifth grade in our middle schools. Typically, fifth graders are usually in the elementary level, but because of space issues, our fifth graders are here at the middle school. So, and we're working on that transition between fourth and fifth, so it's a little bit more consistent for them. That's a goal that we have.
Sorry. Go ahead.
You staying on that topic,
Yeah, yeah.
this topic?
students that are coming from foreign countries, learn how to read English?
Yeah, so we have a very low population for our English learners. They don't even, it's so low that they don't even count that data for us because we have a handful of students. We don't even have enough to make a subgroup for our English learners. But we have a full-time teacher who's working with that population, and they are doing well. Thank you.
Just on this, the reading topic, back up a little bit. At the elementary school, how many individuals focus on reading at the elementary school?
The interventionists,
I think
Intervent- what-
3.5.
3.5.
We have a Title I teacher, a interventionist, and also another Title I. We have a reading facilitator, so 1, 2, 3, and
0.5.
approximately a 0.5.
So basically one for every grade, just about.
I
I'm
mean,
not
for
sure it
how it's
works.
specifically broken out, I
Right.
don't know. But we do have those 3 instructors there at the elementary school.
How
And
many of the kids in elementary school get assistance for these people assist these kids that are now scoring at the 35% level, below reading level of 5th grade? Like, have we identified at the elementary school that these kids are behind to get them the help at the elementary school before they make it to the middle school?
We do. I mean, they have a STAT process where teachers bring the challenges forth to a team of people. They talk about specific needs, and then they put a plan in place. So these kids are identified. It's fluid, so they might get intervention for so many weeks. They're tested again. They might remain in certain groups, or they might come out. It's based on needs, and it's fluid.
Have we identified the kids in 5th grade who are reading below reading level to see if they got assistance? That's what I guess that's more what I'm asking.
Okay.
Like, have we identified? Because if the kids are making it to 5th grade and reading at a 35%, I question whether the assessment at the elementary school is really identifying all the kids that then need the help, right? We all know that we're better off getting help sooner rather than later, because the later
Absolutely.
you are, the harder it is. So I guess that's really my question, because then the jump from 5th to 6th grade is really shocking.
Yeah.
And
Considering
seventh.
my daughter's gonna be one of the 5th graders next year, and then the 6th graders after that, I'm a little scared. So I guess, then the next question is, what's one person gonna do in the middle school?
They're going to work with the teachers and the students to get the kids maybe taking small groups. But this person is a certified person to work on reading skills so that our students, we don't want to give up on them in 5th grade. They're still only in 5th grade, and some kids take longer to learn it. They eventually get it, and maybe they didn't master it in 4th grade. We don't want to drop the ball in 5th grade and 6th grade. They're still young enough that they're learning skills. The issue is right now, our ELA teachers are not really teaching reading skills per se, fluency and comprehension. Students are more independent in the middle school. They're reading literature and, comparing text, all things to prepare for those state assessments. So they're looking at ELA standards versus actually teaching foundational reading skills.
But that is the normal curriculum in the middle school, right? You're not teaching,
Well,
like you
right,
said.
that's the normal curriculum.
You're reading to learn, not learning to read at that level. So I guess my question is how is that one person gonna help an entire school of 300 kids? Something like that? So what's the plan?
So it wouldn't be
Because if we're gonna
300
do this,
children?
what's the plan to make sure that we're effective and whether that truly does make sense?
Right.
As far as,
So at my other school, where I was a middle school principal, we had a reading specialist, and by grade level, that person had a schedule for the day. Students were identified, so, if it was 37%, we would have that list of students. They would have a blocked out in their schedule to meet with the reading specialist, going over specific programming for reading, then going to their other classes. Some class may have to be switched out, but we believe reading is a foundational class for all classes, so that would be a priority class for those identified students. That person would actually have a caseload of working with students throughout the day. And that could also be fluid, depending on how far behind they are. I don't have it with me tonight, but we have students, a low number of students who are reading at the very low elementary level, all the way up to maybe 1 grade level behind, 2 grade level behind. it goes off after that. So everyone's in different places, so you wouldn't necessarily just group all fifth graders, you'd group them by levels. And that would have to be teased out in a very complex schedule that the principal and others would have to work on for that class.
Can I ask a question? How many of these students have been identified for, an IEP or a 504 type of plan that are in that 70, 60, 50 to 70%?
Do you have that information? I don't.
Because it could be, it feels to me, and I think you did mention a sped type teacher that you were adding here as well. So
Right.
it feels to me that might be part of the solution. I don't know, but I don't know what the, if what kind of percentage of those folks are part of this group as well.
So I don't know if Ms. Betancourt wants to address that, but the special education teacher is based on the number of students projected who have services in their plan, not necessarily just reading. The reading could be general education students who are behind with their reading skills.
I think we'd have to pull those numbers apart, because I
Right.
think it's all encompassed.
Yep.
And we do have a lot of students on IEPs that do get specific reading intervention from
Mhm.
special education.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'd have to separate those numbers to
Yep.
give you that.
But is this other position we talked about adding, hoping that
Yes.
same problem?
That split
would-
special ed position?
Yes.
I think it would be helpful if we can figure, I know last year we talked about lots of changes, lots of things that need to be done and not done. Could you give us a summary of what actually did happen? Because I know we talked about what the plan was, but what ultimately was implemented? As far as what we added, what we took away,
So we added the curriculum director position.
we haven't
and
filled that
We
spot
have
yet.
not filled that spot yet, but we hope to, by the end of the week. We took away, some special education teachers, and as a result, it was based on, caseload. And when we looked at the numbers, we knew that we needed to add one back, so one is coming back.
How many did we take away?
I believe it was 3 special education teachers, and there was also a para, 2 paras, I believe. One was just a few positions that weren't filled. And again, those are sometimes, the one para was the library para, which we had unfortunately discontinued. And then, so we had those away. Without going back to look at what some of our increases were, the biggest one that we did add was the curriculum director position. We also added the ELL position.
Oh, that's right.
also
We were
added the ELL
outsourcing that.
Position. So we did add that.
Excuse me, Kristen,
yeah.
can you just add, or Dr. Bailey, what we did instead of the curriculum director for this coming year, we do have 2 other or 3 other people that sort of took the place of the
Oh,
curriculum
yeah,
director.
I mean, that work
So
is
this money was
still
not,
getting done.
right.
So we have
if you can explain-
consultants, sure, we've had a curriculum audit done this year for Ford Middle School. We're in process right now of the elementary school. That's taking a really close look at our assessments to see where they stack up in terms of the rigor compared to the state test. So we're really looking at, our teachers turned in all of their assessments. We're really getting down to the nitty-gritty of, where our concerns are and what we want to focus on. So we had a consultant working on that, a consultant working on curriculum training in math at the middle school. We have consulting services for RTI at the middle school, response to intervention. And our principals, our director of student services, myself, we all do curriculum work. It has to get done, so many people are working on it. That curriculum director would really lead the charge, though, moving forward.
What's going to be your direction for this curriculum director, like the number 1 priority, what would you like them to start?
To start, I would say looking at our outdated curriculum. One of the things we're going to utilize is that curriculum audit to start, because in that curriculum audit, we have next steps. So for instance, one of the things that came to light at the Ford Middle School was a lot of our assessments are low rigor compared to the state assessments. So we know we need to up the rigor. But the teachers are only using what they have, because a lot of things are outdated. A lot of people are struggling to, they use their own resources. It's not aligned. So that person really needs to come in, take a look at that curriculum audit that we're doing, and start to fix it. So we're looking at middle school math. We need a program. We've started to pilot.
Reading gonna be part of this?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. The needs are, we have people working on civics and social studies right now because we have new frameworks at the middle school for that. So our academic coach, as well as our 8th grade social studies teacher, has been working with the state. We have them in a group with the state, working on that. So there's a lot of moving parts, but I'm happy to say that we have a lot of talented staff in our schools, and everyone's taking a piece of it right now. But when we get this person on, they'll really be able to, drive the train, if you will.
How many, just one last quick
Yeah.
question. How many furloughs or layoffs were you subjected to last year?
It was
Staff,
one.
like teachers? Did you lose any teachers?
We did. We lost 3 special education teachers, I believe.
Okay.
We lost a few paraprofessional positions.
And you said one's coming back?
We
special
hope,
ed.
we hope, yes. Mhm.
Okay.
We put in for one additional special education position based on our projections.
And to go back to your question about what we added last year versus, what we didn't add. So looking back into last year's budget, we did add the 2 positions that we talked about, the curriculum director and the English language learner teacher. And the ELL teacher, it allowed us to, a decrease, if you recall, it was offset by contract services. So we found it was more cost effective to have someone under our employ to do that rather than contract it out to, at the time, I believe it was our collaborative. So those were our 2 additions. The other increases from the budget last year were really just taken up of, as you saw this year, of our increases in some of our costs, our tuitions and any supplies, transportation. So really the only, again, things that we added last year were those 2 positions. We did at this time last year when we talked to you all, I believe we had some other positions that we were requesting. So they may sound familiar. We were looking for a teacher, a reading specialist, a math coach, and a BCBA. So, again, some of those, we just know that, and a library media specialist as well. So, as we've seen throughout the years, it might not be the year for one of these positions, but they are still vital to our school department. So we try and come back. We'll try again another year for those positions. So again, here we see from last year, reading specialist and a library media specialist and an additional teacher.
Do you have any stats on the MCAS scores, the latest stats, how we did compare year over year?
We presented that in the fall. I don't have it with me tonight, but we still are above the state, like I said, generally speaking, and we have still 50% of our students are below grade level through MCAS
Did we get better
scores.
or worse?
What is it?
Did we get better
Better
or
or
did we
worse?
get worse?
I think we got slightly better in certain grade levels, certainly. Yeah, we didn't decrease.
I have a question.
And our elementary school is strong in terms of our data.
So for the kids who have IEPs and need extra help with reading, and because they're way behind, who's helping them now?
So if they have reading on their IEP, that's a service that they have to get, service through their special education teacher who is assigned to them. So there's teachers now that have so many students on their caseload. They're serviced however many times a week that the team feels like they need. And based on our projections, we're seeing more students possibly being referred or,
So right now,
yep.
there's only one special ed teacher?
Oh, no, we have two at the middle school. and- Four? Five at the elementary.
So they're the ones that are responsible to help
Mhm.
kids that need the extra help with the reading?
There are students that we have that are reading below level that are not on IEPs.
Correct.
So I think, I just want to make sure
So
we're on,
do they get the extra help they need as well?
well, that's what we're trying
Well,
to
at
do
the
with
elementary
that.
school, they do, because they have the interventionists, those positions that were brought up, 3.5 positions, reading help, but at the middle school, there's nothing in place to help the students who are below reading level, who are not on IEPs.
But you said that was a small percentage, the IEP special ed students, when it comes to the reading scores, where we're 80-something percent in a certain grade. You said that was a representation of a small percentage of that 80-something percent that are not reading, didn't you? Earlier on? What percentage, I
I
think,
had the seventh grade as 72%.
Yeah.
72%.
so 72%, what percentage of the 72% are IEP or special ed students? I think that question was asked
Right, and
before,
I
and you
wrote
said
it
it was a
down
small
as-
percentage.
As getting back to you on that, the percentage of IEP students versus non-IEP students.
This might sound like a stupid question, but it seems like we spend roughly $16 million educating our students, and based on the discussion here about the concerns on the reading skills, I questioned, are we teaching the right things in the elementary school today versus what we were teaching 10, 20 years ago? Because I don't remember these kind of problems when my son was graduating from the schools, nor when I graduated from these schools. I think we all graduated relatively decent grades, and I don't think that those percentages were that high. And it just seems like maybe, how much are we teaching our younger children, first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade? Are we actually teaching them how to read and write, the basics, like we used to learn, versus computers and things of this nature? I mean, do we need to introduce, you mentioned some Apple pads or whatever you were talking about. Do we need to really be introducing that to our young right away in first grade? Do they need to know how to use a laptop in first grade? I don't think so. I think that there's other things that we should be educating in first, second, third grade and not teaching them how to use a computer. Maybe we wait till a later date to do that.
So there's balance. I do not believe in putting students in front of a computer all day long. There's programs out there that recommend that. I certainly do not. Our teachers do a fabulous job of really mixing it up for our students in terms of, sitting for a certain period of time, doing hands-on, differentiating the instruction. One of the things when I started last year, if you recall, I did this listening tour with students, with families, with teachers, and one of the strongest themes that came through was there is no alignment. That I heard that loud and clear from everybody, that there's no alignment within the grade level, there's no alignment across the grade levels. Everybody is just kind of doing what they have. They're doing their best. We want to bring in more alignment. So that's part of our strategic plan. And again, the curriculum is outdated. They haven't had a person who's really been in charge of that. They've had teachers working on it, they've had principals working on it, but no one's really been driving that train for many years. So that's why I think we're at the point where we can't adopt curriculum in all subjects every year. Number one, it's too costly. Number two, it's too much for teachers. You have to do it in a way that they're trained properly. The teachers have to get some buy-in. So we've really spent a lot of time this past year, especially at the middle school, piloting different math programs. Our teachers have actually gone over to Fairhaven to see what the expectations are in high school. We're working with their math director. So there's been a lot of collaboration within Acushnet Public Schools and outside of Acushnet Public Schools. We had to start the work. We can't wait for a curriculum person. We need to get the right person. And I'm really hopeful. We had some really good candidates this time around, so, but we are doing that work. This didn't happen overnight. This is not a new issue in Acushnet. It's just, we're bringing it to light right now, because we're focused on it. I consider myself an instructional leader, and those are things that I'm focused on and looking at. So when I say that we're doing a curriculum audit, it is a very thorough curriculum audit. We're looking at every textbook we use, every assessment we use, and there's rubrics associated. We look at ed reports and curate through the Department of Ed to say, okay, is this something that is judged as a strong research-based program? Some of our programs, the answer is no. So we're using things that are not rigorous, to be honest. So that needs to change. And we do have that sense of urgency, because we certainly know that our kids can't repeat the grade over. They have one shot at fourth grade or fifth grade or whatever grade they're in. So we are trying, this was a focus this year, to get this curriculum audit done at both schools. Ford Middle School is done. I'm more than happy to share the results of that with you. We have an extensive report. We presented that during school committee recently. and the elementary school will be done by the end of the school year.
You don't hold back kids anymore if they don't pass, you just let them go?
No, that still
You
happens.
said they can't repeat that grade.
What I'm saying is, most kids have one shot at a grade, you know? This is their chance in third grade. We can't wait 3 years until we develop a strong curriculum. We have to do it now.
I understand
Yeah.
that.
Can I just chime in, and I mentioned this before, so before I joined the school committee, I was under the assumption, back in the day where, if we thought fifth grade's math wasn't doing well, we would just find a district that was doing really well in fifth grade math, see what book they were using, and buy the book and give it to them, and we'd be all set. But there is so many levels involved with curriculum. So, for example, we're working on the eighth grade math curriculum. Like I said, it's not as easy as, finding a school that's doing great in math, buying their book and giving it to the teacher. There's literally takes sometimes years to put this
You
together.
would imagine the curriculum would start from the bottom and work its way up. You don't start at the top and work your way down, right? You gotta start at the bottom, so you get the first, second, third graders on the right curriculum, so they're progressing up.
Everything
But it's not
spirals.
as simple as just getting a book.
I understand,
It's
I understand.
huge,
I
huge.
understand.
But our eighth graders, I think I talked about this last year, our eighth graders were actually given a different brochure at Fairhaven High School for math. They were not eligible, if you will, to take their algebra class because they didn't have it in eighth grade. We didn't offer it. So we're doing something about that. We've actually introduced it this year. I've made it quite clear with the officials in Fairhaven that our students deserve the same opportunities. And I'm not saying every child has to go into that advanced class, but I want to be able to, the students who want to take the exam and see if they place in, they should have that same opportunity, and they will this year. So we are in the process of fixing that. We're also looking into a dual enrollment program for our eighth grade students at New Bedford High School. That's advanced placement. And again, it's not for everybody, but for those students that do want to go over for the morning for ELA and math, and it's advanced work. It's already established, set up. All the middle schools in New Bedford do it. So we're really thinking outside of the box to give our students the best opportunities they can have in Acushnet. And we're so lucky here because our students at the end of eighth grade have these choices, right? Old Colony, Fairhaven, New Bedford are the three main choices, but it's whatever pathway they are choosing. It's our job to make sure that we prepare them for whichever school they choose to go to.
Sorry, I keep on asking questions here. I totally agree, reading, something needs to happen, so that should be on the priority list. But what is no longer on the priority list? Because obviously, we know that there is a limit, there is a budget. And we have
absolutely.
to think about the
We
whole
know
town,
that.
not
Yep.
just, you're thinking about
Absolutely.
the school, but we have to think about
Yeah.
police, fire, you name
Absolutely.
it. So there's got to be,
So what will happen is, it's definitely a collaborative process. And like last year, when we have to make cuts, we go back into the room, back to the drawing board. It doesn't mean that all the new things would be Xed off. It's okay. What's the most important thing here? What do we keep, what goes? So one of the things that happened last year, we had this discussion about, for example, the library para, who is a good person, but the principals felt like the kids weren't really getting a big bang for their buck in the library. This was not a certified person, and I don't want to call it babysitting, but they were in the library with outdated books, not really having any lessons per se, and they were doing some catch-up work. We felt like we could change the schedule and really make better use of the time, knowing that our future, we wanted to bring on a certified library media specialist, which would be more appropriate for 2020, okay? So that was a cut that was, discussed, and it's collaborative. It's based on the needs. We always focus our decisions on the best needs of our students, so it's a lot of discussion on what needs to happen. And we understand where we're at right now, so.
I think to go back to your question is about the numbers of staff that we are down from last year, just looking at the cuts that we had to make at the end of the budget season. We were, as I said, it was 3 teachers, it was 3 special education teachers, 2 paras, one was a special education para and one was a library paraprofessional, and we had a part-time secretary. So that's 3 teachers, 2 paras, a part-time secretary, And then we had a para position over the summer that we didn't fill as a result of a resignation. So we're down that many staff
You're
from,
hoping to bring back one teacher?
at least one.
In the question related to that, with the loss of, special ed teachers, does that affect
Special ed teacher.
the district placements in the future?
Those three.
Because they're not getting this, there's a reduction in services, say, on the elementary level, the special. Does that in turn affect out-of-district placements in the future?
I don't believe so, no. Students are, they have a team meeting, and it's based on their needs. The cut in teachers last year was based on the numbers. We had some teachers that had a very low case number. We looked at around the region. Ms. Betancourt did a whole study on the caseloads of special education teachers around the area, and where we were at, and our numbers were much lower. They had, one teacher may have had 7 students, where maybe an average would be 20, 25. Do you know what I mean? So we tried to look at that and be fiscally responsible to, but we always make sure that our students' needs are met. So we wouldn't give them less service or anything like that. It's whatever they need, and that's why we're projecting the need is there for an additional special education
No, but
teacher for next
I
year.
see the out-of-district placements costs increasing. And then I see prevention services on the lower grades being reduced.
Some of the tuitions
Am I
have gone up.
making a quantum leap here as far as,
So overall, this year, our tuitions did decrease, although, as we know, the private school tuitions went up, but the collaborative tuitions went down. One thing that's helpful to us that we sought your support of several years ago was the creation of a resource room, some resource rooms in our buildings. So those are the special ed teachers that help to keep students that may otherwise go out of district in our district. So those teachers, we're fortunate to have all our teachers, but those classrooms are helping out with that effort as well. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah, we did have a reduction in out-of-district this year.
It's just that we did have an increase in some more costly placements. So it's numbers of students, and it's the cost associated with that tuition. So we may have less students at a higher cost, or may have more students at a lower cost. So it really, it's really dependent on the demographics of the population.
would the increase in cost be due to need for more intensified services, or is it basically just cost of living factors?
It's based on what the placement costs. So these out-of-district placements, the
Yeah, but how do they
collaboratives, they
determine that?
assign a tuition fee. The collaboratives are made up of boards. So some of the boards are comprised of school committee members, some of the boards are comprised of superintendents. It really depends on the charter of that collaborative school. And they will vote on the tuition and fees for that year.
So
it's-
for example, at Reed's Collaborative, I'm on that board, they've been looking into a new building, a new school.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. I
Yeah.
thought maybe,
So they're looking into a new building. Now they're at the point where, I actually go tomorrow, they're talking about leasing a building now. But the tuition will go up because of that need that they have. They've outgrown their space, it's not appropriate. So the need is there for our most challenging students in the surrounding districts who attend Reed's Collaborative. That's why that tuition is going up.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, just, oh, were you going? I'm sorry.
I have a transportation question. I was going to shift, if that's okay. You had said during the presentation that you brought back the late buses because you realized you didn't need something. What was it that you didn't need?
So this year, what we saw was that over the summer, we have some resignations. So when we average out the placement, not the placements, we're switching over to salaries. So we may hire people at a lower salary than was budgeted. We may hire them at a higher salary. So it really all depends what we're looking for, and obviously we want to hire the best person all the time. So sometimes we have some salary surpluses, and that's where
It wasn't that you
our-
didn't need something. it
Right,
was-
No,
it was
it's a
some
surplus.
surpluses, exactly. So,
Gotcha.
some years it might be some offsets from, we may have had a student that was out of district move out that we're no longer responsible for. So every month I do that analysis with the school committee, is to say, where are at budgeted actual for salaries, tuition, transportation. So early on, and I know that that was something that, when we did make that late bus cut last spring, we said we knew that if things changed, that was something that we could easily bring back, because we can just start it up again, and it was a relatively lower cost. So it was budgeted probably around 17,000 last year. I believe we brought it back at the end of November, so I think the estimated cost for the remainder of that would be about $12,000. So that was something that we could, fit within our means, that we felt would make an improvement for students.
And one of the other things, if I could add, is some of the critical shortage teachers, like math, science, a reading specialist, those salaries tend to be higher because they're hard to find, those teachers. But elementary teachers, we can certainly hire at a lower, so if we have somebody leaving on the higher end, we can certainly hire, and that's what the surplus was this past year.
And the transportation's going up $100,000. That's all contractual,
Yes, so.
Yeah.
but we have a new contract we have to renegotiate.
So the transportation, total transportation is going up, 100,000. So that is comprised partly due to the increase in the contract. There was a 3% increase. Each
Yep.
year, we have a transportation contract with Amaral Bus for, price per bus per day for 180 days. So from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, there was a 3% increase, and that's pretty standard across the board. I will say that when we opened the bids a couple years ago, we had a decrease from the previous 3-year contract, so that's almost unheard of. So we may not even be where we would have been without that decrease, because we were able to have some competition in our bidding this time. So again, we go out to bid a year from now, so, it's anyone's guess as to what those costs are going to be. But that's part of the increase, is just the increase in the contract, the price per bus per day, in addition to, and the big bus, increased by 34,000. As I said, half of that is the 3% increase, and half of that is bringing back the late bus. And then the other part was just an increase based on our special ed routes. So we take a look at who we think we're going to be transporting, based on how many students, might share the vehicle, that might not share the vehicle. We really can't predict any cost shares all that well, but we do those, as we can. But for the budget, and then we always know that the private transportation providers are going to probably have an increase in that route cost, so we put in an estimated amount for an increase for that.
Are we
So.
still only going to require the flat front buses?
That'll be a discussion over the next year, so that is something that, as you know, we have required in our contracts for many, many years. Sometimes that, limits competition, as we've said, because a lot of the various transportation providers, they may have an inventory of buses that are coming off another school district that they know that school district might want newer buses, but maybe they fit our requirements. So, but if they're not the flat front style buses, then, that's what we have required for many years in our bid.
Have we looked at whether, if we can get a cheaper price, not requiring the flat front buses, but at least putting the bus monitors? Like, can you support it? Can you balance out? We all know why, right? We want the flat front buses. Can you balance that out, the safety feature, by bringing the monitors back on? Because I'm questioning whether the monitors would be cheaper, monitors plus a regular bus versus the flat front.
It may well be cheaper, but in terms of quantifying the safety, I don't know if you could do that. I don't know if you could compare the safety of one particular style bus to having an extra human on board. I'm not sure. But that's something, like I said, in the next several months, once we consider the specifications. I do know, as I've said, looking at why we haven't gotten other bidders, sometimes they've told me it's the flat front style bus. We did bid out by bus unit trips. Most places bid out by per bus per day. So we tried that to see if that would make a difference and encourage bidding. So most school districts really don't get a lot of companies bidding on their bus contracts. You find that, it's very territorial. You have the same companies that come to your bid, but only maybe the same one or two will submit a bid. But last year, the last go-round, we had a lot more interest. We did a transportation study that I believe helped spark some interest. And that helped with some competition, because competition is always best for the lower price. But I will take the opportunity to say that we are very satisfied with the cooperation and service we get from Amaral Bus. Now, clearly, based on the laws, we have to go with the lowest bidder. But in our case, we have been very satisfied with Amaral Bus, and they're very responsive and very cooperative with anything that we've asked of them.
How many buses do we use here?
So we use 11 buses, 11 buses plus a spare. So we
11
have a
buses
spare on
for
hand.
elementary?
So
and
we
then
use
those
10
same
at the
11 buses
elementary,
come here
yep.
at different times?
So we use 10 buses at the elementary, and we use, I believe, 9 buses at the middle school. However, there's a time factor because we also provide a bus for St. Francis based on Mass General Law. And their times that they have their dismissals and arrivals compete with ours, so we have to have, that's the same time as Ford Middle School,
The one bus we're talking?
for one bus.
So 9, 10 buses. My question is we're at $1.3 million in transportation line item. When does it become, maybe the school committee and the school administration looks at buying our own buses or leasing our own buses? Where is that break-even point? Ms. Delgado brought up a good point about the school monitors and the bulk nose versus the flat nose. If you're gonna look at that, maybe we look at a lease on school buses and what it costs to have drivers in them and
Right,
just
so
see
we
what
get
that cost
drivers,
is.
insurance, mechanics, all of, a dispatcher
If
to
you're leasing, you'll be on
oversee.
a reschedule anyway, so you won't worry about too much of repairs for the amount they're being used. I wouldn't be too,
Well,
5-year leases.
Yeah, buses always can break down, so we would need to have, some funds to repair them. That's,
You
we
would.
do
Yeah,
have
I
a
think it's
spare.
worth exploring, looking at it and seeing where that line item would come out. I mean, it's $1.3 million.
Yeah, I do know most school departments contract out for their regular big buses, the yellow buses. Where some school departments do own their own buses is they do own their own vans for out-of-district transport. So they'll have some of their own runs, or they'll do a hybrid, or they'll find that they just want to outsource it in general. So that's, something else to explore is to, take baby steps and maybe start with some vans for our out-of-district placements.
Have we ever looked into that? 'Cause that
For the
sounds like
for
something
the
that
big
might be-
bus?
No,
No.
not the big bus, I mean the vans.
The vans?
If we started those baby steps, I guess.
Not very seriously.
Okay.
There would be that initial injection of funds that we would need to purchase the vehicle. We would need to have a component of stable substitute drivers as well, because as you can imagine, if a driver is sick at 6 o'clock in the morning, we need to be able to get to a sub to get that bus out to the student. So that would require someone to oversee that and manage that, and have workers' compensation insurance, any payroll taxes, everything that's involved with employing a person, health
But that can
insurance
run through the
perhaps.
normal- That can run through the normal payroll, right?
Correct, but those,
That
I
doesn't
don't
need a
want
separate-
those expenses to be overlooked either.
No, absolutely.
Mr. Cabral?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Changing the subject, one document that you had up on the screen that I think would be helpful to the Finance Committee, and I'd like to see it again, so maybe you could distribute it, you don't need to put it back up, but the long-term trend in the changing numbers on the budget, I think,
What a nightmare.
the increase proposed for 2021 is significant, but I think it's helpful to look at the longer-term trend, and maybe if you could distribute that to the Finance
Sure,
Committee
sure. We
and
can do
send a
that.
copy to Ms. Hebert as well for us to look at. I think that's a good document. Is it on behind me?
It is.
Because it's not on in front of you, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you could send that over to us, I think that'd be helpful, because that's a longer-term look
Yes,
at
I'm
what the
going to.
budget's done over time.
higher
I think
numbers.
I think that's gonna be helpful to the Finance Committee.
Yes.
So I'd like to just.
That's all I have.
that's a great point. But please note that all of these years that are there are what we ended up with, not what we originally asked for. So you can see here, please just note this, in 2020, we were asking for, I believe, 4.8% or 4.9% when we had this meeting 1 year ago today. And then we had
It's
to
still,
bring
I
it
mean,
in.
still
It's
good
still
look
great,
at
but I
what's-
just,
what the reality of your budget growth has
Yep.
been over the years. I think it's a useful, it's very useful information.
It's good work, York.
That's all I had. Thank you.
thank you. I'd like to bring on one point that Julie had brought up about transportation. That is something that the Budget Subcommittee has talked about briefly. But again, it comes up with what Mrs. Flynn says about all these added things that compound it to pretty much have our own transportation company. So we keep looking at that and bringing it up, especially for our special education, because it is such a high cost. So again, you know, we try to revisit things every year when it comes to that, to transportation.
So just to hit on what the chairman of the Board of Selectmen just talked about, is looking at your numbers over all the years, it's because of budget constraints from the overall town. I first glimpse at your numbers, the $800,000 numbers, I think it's important to mention tonight, so everybody in the room realizes what we're up against is, the town only has roughly $650,000 every year to budget with. The free cash number that we have is about $1 million, and that's free cash. And the DOR says that every town should have roughly $1 million generating of free cash every year for capital purchases and things of that nature. You guys are looking at another substantial amount for articles. So we clearly don't have that kind of money. Once you take the $650,000 to prop the levy, the 2.5 levy limit that we can only raise, which is $450, and then we get capture about $200,000 in new growth, that gives us roughly $650,000. What everybody needs to understand is, we have to take that number and then we subtract our fixed costs. We have health insurance that some of you are part of that we absorb on our side of the town, right? You have pension costs, those are all fixed costs, things that increase. So if that increase is $200,000, we're back to $450,000 to split amongst all of us.
Right.
So we all need to work together to try to figure out what is that balance that we're gonna be doing, because I don't think that I know that we're not at a point anymore where we should be using more of our free cash like we did last year, $462,000 last year of free cash to balance the budget. That's very dangerous. We're at a level now where we're at 1.039 in free cash. So there may be some flexibility. The Board of Selectmen are willing to use some of that free cash for balancing the budget, depending on where we're at. But we clearly don't have $1 million additional to the 650 to balance the budget. So I just want everybody in the room to understand what we're up against. I think last year was a disaster when it came to our budgeting, because the Board of Selectmen didn't see a lot of our budgets, and when we did, it was too late, and things were being changed, and we're trying to vote on them, which we never really partook in that. So that was extremely dangerous year last year, and that's why we used $460,000. We don't have that kind of money. So I just trying to make it clear to everybody, so everybody here understands, as much as we'd love to spend an extra $1 million or $2 million, we just don't have that money available. So it's either gonna come down to someone's gonna be asking the residents for an override, which I don't know if that'll fly in the town of Acushnet, or we're gonna have to come together and figure out where we're gonna make cuts as a group, and share those responsibilities with the school department and say, hey, this is what we have available for funds, this is what, like we've done in the past, and it's gonna be a struggle. And it pains me to look at your increase in your budget of $800,000+, when I just told you that the Prop 2.5 override is $450 that the town's able to raise, plus $200,000 in new growth. That's what the DOR says we should be using for budgetary purposes, and that's not what we've been doing. We're at a point where, again, it's a cutoff. So there's a fine line and a balance that we're gonna be walking in the next few years. I think the Finance Committee's got their hands full this year. I know that we talked about, I think Ms. Hebert gave them a number of maybe a $230,000 deficit. I think we're looking at a much bigger deficit than that.
Yeah, because I think it's like a $280,000 deficit. That's including using the same amount of free cash as last year. So the $462,000 that we used to balance the budget last year is included in that. So if you were to take that amount and try to get us to zero, it would be a lot higher.
So if we use the same amount of money, we are talking $650,000 deficit that this finance committee would now be looking at
Yeah.
if we use that same amount of money of free cash, which they're saying that 462 would be minus the 1.039 in free cash that we have
Yes.
available now. So then next year, we only have basically $600,000 in free cash. So that's trying to signal this to all of us in the room that we're at dangerous levels of funding, is all I'm trying to make a point to everybody in the room, so everybody understands there's not all this money that's really available. So when they say available, in other words, for free cash, it's available cash, it's really not available. And all I'm trying to make a point is, our fixed costs are going up. I seen some of your salary numbers, what your fixed costs are going up on a yearly basis versus what the town side is. You're pretty much absorbing that whole 650 just in salary fixed costs, contractual obligations, we'll call them, from the town side and the school committee side. I'm at a point where it's troublesome looking at these numbers. I do this all the time. That's all I do is look at these numbers and look at these numbers and look at these numbers. And I'm at a point where I think I need to get it out on the table so that everybody understands the end is near. And we have to do everything we can, humanly possible, to make sure that we stay inside of some guidelines of funding all our needs. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gaspar. Further questions?
I got a little question on the maintenance expense. We plan on any extra money on sanitizing school and virus going around? Is that gonna be an added expense on your maintenance program?
Right now, we have our custodians in-house that are continuing their cleaning protocols. We've checked our supplies. We are trying to increase our levels of supplies as best we can. As you know, there's shortages. Even some things that we had placed an order for 3 weeks ago, before this, is out of stock. Any extra precautions? At this time, I think Dr. Bailey has communicated, so she can
So there's another
explain-
letter
yeah.
going out
Mm-hmm.
to families, and my letters to families will be posted on the website. So I believe my first letter went out February 28th with all of the things that we're doing, but just to summarize it quickly, we're doing an educational component with every child at both schools about hand washing, how to properly sneeze and cough into your elbow. I know in the health classes at the middle school, every child is reviewing a video on coronavirus, what it is, because it can become a lot of anxiety. This is all we hear on the news, right? We posted that video through Brain Pop on our website. It's actually helpful for adults, too, to really understand it. We ordered, as Ms. Flynn just said, supplies, if we need extra masks, dehydration, fever reduction supplies in our nursing offices, gloves. We wanted just to make sure we were fully stocked. We had a meeting with our custodians, so in addition to all of their daily cleaning protocols, we're making sure that every day the daily, the touch points are done with special sprays at night when no one's around. We do the tabletops, keyboards.
Is that gonna require any extra hours?
Not at this
Currently,
time.
no, but
Currently,
that is
no.
something that we may, every day we're getting more and more guidance from the Department of Education, the Department of Health, from the
CDC.
CDC.
That can be passed
So,
down to the schools?
nothing that we're aware of yet, but who knows?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so right now, we're doing what we've always done, is cleaning and disinfecting, the touch points, the desks, as best that we can, with a heightened awareness. We've also asked the bus company
Yep.
to ask their drivers to, sanitize, clean
Every
in
day.
seats, do the seats every day. We, shared some of our supplies that we use in the schools with them, so it's the same, it's the, green cleaning supplies that we use through the state contract. So, right now, but there's something new, the past few days, that's what we've spent I'm gonna say most, if not all of our time on.
It's
is
an
learning
evolving
and
situation.
responding. Yeah.
I mean, there were
So-
30 of us today, and we met with the Commissioner of Education. We have another conference call tomorrow, and we have conference calls now once a week on this evolving situation. And the notice that will go out tomorrow really talks about that, we have to be flexible. Things can happen at a moment's notice. I'm asking staff, requiring staff, and asking families tomorrow to disclose their vacation travel destinations. We just want to be very aware of where people are traveling to, because within 14 days, can become symptomatic of the coronavirus. So we can ask them to be quarantined for up to 14 days. So there's all these guidelines that we're
We're
following.
taking a look at the groups that we have in the buildings, because the
Right.
advisement now is not to have large gatherings of people. So we're taking a look at that, and what we're, some of the outside groups that.
I'm willing to leave if it's
I
helpful
know.
to the,
And they
It's
advised,
helpful, though, we're trying
anybody
to
with a
accomplish.
medical condition, anyone over the age of 60 should not be attending any large gatherings. So,
DeRoche has a question.
Yes, have all the staff contracts been settled? I know the teachers settled.
yep, we're currently working on 2 additional units, and then we have 2 more after that, but we expect those to go a lot quicker.
They haven't been completely settled, but.
No, the
on
teachers are settled, and we're doing the secretaries and custodians now. I'm hoping that, I believe we meet next week, and we're hoping that that will be settled rather quickly, based on our previous meeting, and then we go on to the CAF and the Paris. So the goal is, we really want to get these all settled before the end of the school year.
Okay.
What were the cost of the mediation process?
It was split.
It was split, I believe it was $500
That's all?
for the school department, and I believe it was split between.
Okay, that includes, what would include cost of the,
Now, that doesn't include the cost of our attorney.
That's the question.
That's the
Right.
cost paid to the mediator.
no, I was interested in the cost of attorneys, what it ran us.
So, I had looked at this based on a question I received back in the fall. So our legal fees are all in one line item. So I'd have to go into look at all the invoices and the detail of the invoices to see, because we pay attorneys for various things, one of which is negotiations. So, but I can tell you that back in the fall, I believe it was right around $5,000 at that point for fiscal year 2020.
Okay.
We started this process a year ago.
So you didn't
That was
exceed
for-
your line item by any means?
Not yet, no.
And we've been watching it, because we know we
Correct,
were
that's
in
right.
negotiations, so it could happen, but I thought we were doing okay.
Right, yeah.
With that.
As of the last budget, we are about close to 70% expended in the legal fees, so,
Okay.
with a couple more months to go.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll conclude this meeting. I just want everybody to know that this is the first meeting that we've had on this budget. And based on past experiences, we're going to have many, many more meetings before the budget is finalized. So we're going to be crunching a lot of these numbers. The Finance Committee does not have all of the town side budgets available to us yet. We will have that within the next 2 weeks, I believe. So at that point, we will be meeting again and contacting you folks, and hopefully we'll come to
We appreciate the
a
collaboration.
resolution and something that's satisfactory to all parties.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
So moved?
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, selectmen out.
Motion to approve, school committee?
So moved.
Julie, I want to catch you before I.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. School committee is adjourned.
Mr. McGlynn?
Motion to adjourn, Finance Committee.
Motion made, second, all in favor? Opposed?
Oh, my bedtime reminder
So
just
voted.
went off.
We are adjourned.